What a cool, crazy folding cleaver we have here. What is going on, guys? Carter with Edged Mindset. We're looking at another Shooziz knife. This is the HAN317 in DC53 steel, which from what I understand is just a souped up D2, and in a big, thick blade stock like this, I think that is an excellent, excellent choice. This is another budgety type knife. This one's climbing up in the price range though, compared to these guys, which are a little bit more budgety than these. These come in under $100, about $85 for the 315, I believe is what it is. Hard to keep these numbers straight because they don't do naming on their knives. They're all numbered. But this is a big, thick boy, and in fact, this is the knife that put Shooziz on my radar. I saw this, and I was like, I have got to have one of these. I saw the price point under $100, and I'm like, boom, I'm in for two, and that's what I did. To cut to the chase, before we get into specs and things like that, I will say I recommend this knife. However, there are a couple things that they misstepped on that are small, but they would have made such a big difference and would have made me say, go buy this knife. Obviously, go buy this knife in the context of if you like crazy, overbuilt, wild-looking designs, which I know not everybody does, because they make sure to let me know whenever I show a knife like this how ugly it is and how dumb I am for buying it. So I'm fully aware that this is not everyone's cup of tea. So if that's your opinion, I mean, you can tell me in this video too, but just rest assured, I hear it all the time. You're not the first one to say it. This thing, in my opinion, is just really cool. Now, I wouldn't pay hundreds of dollars for this. I mean, even if it had better steel, I don't think I would. Like if this came in S35 VN and had like a titanium pocket clip or something, I don't know if I would pay that. But at the price point these are coming in at with this wild, interesting design, I'm in. And for the most part, I really, really like it. Let's do some specs here. Overall blade length is about 4 inches, it looks like. Overall length is about 9 1/4. And let's do blade thickness, because that is going to be a big question. How thick is that blade? 0.278. Woo, that is monster thickness. Handle thickness, almost an inch, 0.917. It is a beast. You can see how big this gap is. And I was curious, because of this PMP Beast Prime, how you can touch that blade there. I wonder what it's like on this guy. Not too bad. I mean, that gap is so wide that, yeah, you can slide your whole finger in there, but you'd have to really get it in there to actually touch that blade. Like I can barely feel it right there, sticking my pinky in. So that's cool. Not that big of a deal. Cleaver style blade. You've got the cleaver hole up here, kind of stylized. Everything is nice and chamfered. This finish is the stonewash. You can get it in satin. And of course, the PVD, I believe, PVD finish right here. You've got the usual Shooziz design markings. That's another thing I appreciate with Shooziz, right? Their design language follows through their models. For the most part, you can identify if a knife is from Shooziz because they have a design language that goes through the models. It's not just a bunch of random knife designs that they stick together. They all kind of look homogeneous, and I appreciate that. This thing came razor sharp out of the box. It is thick behind the edge. I mean, it's really thick. The flat grind is reasonably high, but when you've got this thick a blade stock, it's only going to get so thin as it gets down here, and it is pretty thick behind the edge, which is fine because this design really is meant for chopping and bludgeoning and using this tip to pry things open, which you can see how thick that tip is. It is very robust. So I think that's perfectly fine for what this knife is going for. 2 modes of deployment, thumb studs, and then the flipper. The flipper, let's just talk about the flipper. Or wait, no, let's not talk. Let's hold on. That's one of my points of contention. Let's move on to the next thing. I don't want to lose my train of thought too bad. So micarta scales, you've got all kinds of milling in here. You've got these same milled line designs. similar to the Blade and similar to the other models. G10 backspacer with a gear pattern, really thick steel liners. I'll talk about that here in a minute too, hopefully. These screws go into steel standoffs that go through this backspacer here. So great choice, makes it nice and robust. Everything fits together well. I've taken these apart because when I actually bought them, these scales were on the other knives. I ordered it with green scales and stonewash, and then the black everything on the blue scales. I got these, I changed my mind, and I took them apart, which brings me to another point. One of the earlier videos I saw on this, the owner struggled to get the pivot out because it would just spin. So apparently they fixed that and updated it, because now this pivot is captured. It has a flat end and it will not spin on you. So you can easily take this thing apart, adjust the pivot, all that kind of stuff. Let's see, micarta detent is perfect. No play. Out of the box, it's centered, but I'll talk about that here in a minute because there is some issues with that. Pocket clip is cool. I mentioned this on the other Shooziz. I really like how they water jet or laser cut out the logo here rather than just having a surface kind of lasering or paint or anything like that. I think that looks really, really good. Retention is excellent. Pocket clip functions great. It's deep carry. You do have a little bit sticking out, but not too bad. Nice big lanyard hole. Overall construction's pretty dang good, especially at this price point. One question I have, though, is this stop pin. So that stop pin is used for the closed position for sure, but it seems like it's used for the open position as well. You can see a line right there, so it is making contact, but it almost looks like these thumb studs are making contact on these liners too. So it's like triple vault locked. If that really is making contact on these liners, that is really, really cool, because that means this thing is never going to budge. Now let's talk about the flipper. So the flipper design kind of sucks. It's too low. They could have raised this up quite a bit if they just milled more shouldering here. This could have been higher, but the worst part is it angles down. Why would you angle a flipper down? I mean, I guess the idea is that it's not as sharp in your finger, but you kind of slide off of it. And then it's got some milling up here. It's got some jimping, but it's too far forward. Like where you actually need the jimping, right here, it's smooth. And you kind of slide off. And it's already not the most effective flipper because of how heavy the blade is. If your finger is at all moist, if you got any sweat, anything, see, I'm on camera trying my best and I still slipped off. Not a good design. I think they could have raised this by shouldering that, made this more flat, and especially put jimping on the back here. I just don't understand that. The other thing that I want to talk about is the centering. So it does have a little bit of side-to-side wiggle. This one's not as much as this one. If I tighten up the pivot so that the wiggle goes away, then the blade goes off center. So something is a little off on the machining on this knife. It's not exactly perfect, so that when you tighten this pivot up to get rid of any side-to-side wiggle, it's kind of tilting that blade just a little bit. So I have to kind of pick lesser of two evils. Do I want a little bit of side-to-side wiggle and an uncentered blade, or do I want a centered blade with some wiggle? I have to make that choice. If it wasn't for, ooh, we didn't get a weight. We didn't get a weight, like I'm showing a big, giant, crazy, overbuilt knife, and I didn't get a weight on this. Probably because I think the weight's appropriate. 13.5 ounces for a knife this big, a knife this beefy, I don't think is all that crazy. They could have done some more skeletonization. It is skeletonized, you can see in there. I've heard some people complain that they feel this liner is too thin for how thick this blade is. I do not agree. This is a very thick liner. It just looks thin because the blade stock is so thick, but that doesn't really matter. I heard somebody mention that with this weight of a blade, you need a heavier duty lock. No, you don't. This blade weighs a few ounces more than a standard blade. That amount of force is nothing on this lock compared to putting force on the back of the spine. Because when you move away from this pivot here and you're putting pressure on this spine, it magnifies how much force is actually being put on here. So long story short, it's perfectly fine. It's very, very thick. I would not want a thicker liner on here. In fact, you could get away with a thinner liner. It just looks a little weird because of how thick that blade stock is. So no issue there. It's running on multi-row bearings. It is pretty dang smooth and so fun to play with. But most importantly, it just looks so cool. Oh, ergonomics. Sorry, guys. Let's talk ergonomics. Not great. I got big, long hands. Anything this wide, I mean, there's no surprises, right? It feels like you think it would. You do have some hot spots here just because of how wide it is. In order to get rid of that, you'd have to contour this thing so much, and you'd have to reduce this amount of space. It's just one of those things where I don't think you could get much better ergonomics on something like this without thinning up that blade and making some major changes to the design. I really appreciate the way this thing looks. I like this custom giant pivot collar. I think it looks cool. Might be obnoxious to you, but I always appreciate it when a knife does something other than standard, knifesupply.com style things. Oh, the other thing I forgot to mention, this has that kind of gimmicky thing where you can take the little screw thing, put it in here, and it engages through that hole, screws into the other side, so it turns it into a quote-unquote like fixed blade. If you're into that kind of thing, this will do that. I don't care about it, so I don't use it. All right, let me know. What do you think of this bad Mama Jamma? Is this something you would ever pick up, even just for fun, just to add to your overbuilt crazy knife collection? Let me know down below. I'll catch you on the next one.